agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. I'm joined today by Cleveland area attorney and Republican factotum Jay Carson. Hey, Jay, how are you doing today?
Mike, I'm feeling more valued than a American Samoan voter today.
Well, that's to Mike Bloomberg, at least.
Exactly. That someone would spend that amount of money for my vote. But no, otherwise, can't complain. Spring's getting closer here in Cleveland.
Absolutely. So, I think we'll probably want to lead off with, the story that I think everyone's speaking of Mike Bloomberg and American Samoa and so forth. So why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Well, I'll say after the events of last week, I was reminded by a line in Hemingway's "The Sun Also Rises." One character asks another, "So how did you go bankrupt?" And the answer is gradually, and then suddenly.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of applies to the campaigns of the late presidential contenders Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Tom Steyer, Mike Bloomberg, and Elizabeth Warren. In the span of a week, we're now down to a two-candidate race following a Biden victory in South Carolina, which seemed to energize both voters and fundraisers. Biden swept the southern states on Super Tuesday, as well as picking up Minnesota, while Sanders took his home state of Vermont, and I'll use the cliche delegate-rich California, although California is a proportional state, so he doesn't get all of them, and they're still counting as to what his final count will be. On the other hand, financial news titan and billionaire Mike Bloomberg spent over $550 million of his own money to win American Samoa. So from here, the race goes to it's sort of a smattering of Midwest states next week. The biggest of which is Michigan, which could be a toss-up. Sanders had done well in Michigan before, but with the new Biden energy and what seems to be, I want to say, sotto voce kind of endorsement by President Obama. And his as well as he's done in the African American community, it's going to be pretty close. So Mike, what are your thoughts as far as? And I guess my last observation before I turn to you is that if you had asked me a year ago, and I think you probably did, where we would be at this point, I think you and I would both probably have answered this: it's a Biden-Sanders race, yeah. And here we are. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned you thought about Hemingway, and it's funny. This week I actually, and this will give people a good sense of sort of the high culture, low culture gap between us. My initial thought was not of Ernest Hemingway, but of another cultural figure, and that's LL Cool J. And I thought, don't call it a comeback, right? Because that's where my head is. But really, That's one of my thoughts. Is that, and it kind of goes into what you were saying, is that this narrative, right, of Biden's amazing, miraculous resurrection, essentially. And that, but that was only because everyone was just so jumping the gun on almost no evidence. It's like in the first inning, the first batter up hits it's a triple, and everyone says, "Well, that's it. We might as well just go home." And so that's why it's not, I don't think, a comeback. And I've been saying for a long time, we don't know anything until after Super Tuesday. And I won't sprain my arm patting myself on the back, or maybe I will, but it turns out that was actually right. And of course, that's one of the things that always annoys me about political reporting. And I get it. It's not like they can say, well, we don't know anything, come back in a couple of weeks or something like that.
Right.
But that kind of win-loss framing and up-down, that's, it's just sort of ridiculous, basically. So that's my thought on that. More generally, it seems to me that kind of the much less raucous or mostly silent majority of the Democratic Party spoke on Tuesday, and I say thank God for that. That was, of course, the result that
there have been a number of sort of editorials and Republican-leaning publications that have made the same point, that it was sort of a thank you, Democrats.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a great editorial by David Brooks, who is sort of the sort of center right version of me. I would say, we kind of glance at each other across.
That's how he describes himself.
Yeah, but yeah, his argument was that the establishment maybe has one more chance. And of course, if Biden either loses the election, assuming he's going to win the nomination, which there still is a ways to go, but still.
Sure.
But if he either loses the election or he gets into office and things deteriorate even further, that might cause all kinds of problems on the more progressive left, certainly. But that's certainly way ahead of things. But I'm happy about the result to a certain extent, I guess, because I feel like the Biden campaign is sort of a nostalgia campaign, right? Because he talks about the Obama Biden, that kind of thing. It's sort of like, if you want another Barack Obama, just older and whiter, well, I'm your guy, basically, right? And to me, one of the problems, and here's where I agree with a lot of folks on the progressive left, that there are, I think, some fundamental issues with our democratic institutions. Not that they need to be raised and we need to start over in some kind of a revolutionary type of Sandersian way, I don't know, but that there are some real issues. And one of the things I admired about Elizabeth Warren's campaign was that her focus was squarely on, she called it corruption. I would say institutional reform is a less dramatic way to put it. To a lesser extent, Pete Buttigieg was like that as well, but I don't get that sense from Joe Biden at all. And the reason I think this is important is that because if you believe that there are some fundamental problems with our institutions and you go in trying to do policy stuff first, well, it's going to not work, because if your foundation is crumbling, you can't build anything on that. And I think that's what Elizabeth Warren understands, and that's to a lesser extent maybe what Pete Buttigieg understands. But I don't think that Joe Biden necessarily believes that, and so I think that's a problem.
Yeah. First, I want to say I completely appreciate the LL Cool J reference.
I thought you might.
And I'm kicking myself that I didn't, think of that first. But because I think it makes a larger point that you and I try to make a lot of times regarding political reporting, and it's one of these weird sort of things where every once in a while something happens that it seems like a surprise, and then about a minute or two later, you're like, oh, yeah, that was always going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
It was very much the conventional wisdom that Biden would win South Carolina. It was very much sort of the conventional wisdom that Biden would win those southern states. With Klobuchar out of the race, so it's one of those. It's a weird thing of it's a surprise until it happens, and then it's plainly obvious that it was always going to happen that way. And I think that's something that so often gets lost in the horse race coverage. And I'll confess, last time I was on, I was very much thinking that Biden was done for, or maybe not done for, but certainly on the way out.
And even I thought that my prediction was that he was in a deep fade, but he would be able to hold on, and that certainly isn't how it looks like now. So I think it's so easy, because most of everything we see is that just daily drumbeat from the media on whatever side, and so it's understandable that we get swept up in that, But yeah. I also wanted to talk.
We should be better. We should know better.
Well, I think sometimes we do, but we're human, But yeah, I wanted to. You mentioned Mike Bloomberg, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I'll take issue a little bit with what you said. That. I mean, you can. There are a couple ways to look at the Bloomberg campaign. Is that, well, he spent around $500 million to win American Samoa and a handful of delegates, right? Another way to look, and that's certainly true. Another way to look at it is he put out $500 million, roughly a little bit less than that, of anti-Trump ads. Because Mike Bloomberg's number one goal was always and is still to defeat Donald Trump. Now, if that happens because Mike Bloomberg was president, well, that's certainly a preferred outcome. But even now, after he withdrew, he announced that he's going to form, basically based on his campaign, this group that's going to focus on 6 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina, because his massive data operation has decided that, or concluded that that's going to determine the presidency this year, and that seems pretty dead on to me, and that he's going to.
Well, you and I could have concluded that without a massive data.
Well, there
operation.
you go. Certainly we could. I don't know if Bloomberg's hiring, but certainly has the budget for it.
Exactly,
But anyway,
yeah. Mike, we could do it a lot cheaper.
There you go. But the point being is that he is going to still put an awful lot of money into that in a very smart and focused way, and so I think there's a very good chance that Mike Bloomberg will still get what he ultimately wanted, just not his ideal of a Mike Bloomberg presidency, but certainly having his forces, his team, his money behind what looks like to be the Biden campaign will certainly be a major plus for the Democrats.
Well, let's explore that further, because that was something that I was interested in talking about, and is that. Is there because I sort of took maybe a little bit of the opposite lesson from this, because part of my reasoning for thinking that Biden was going to be going by the wayside was that Bloomberg offered the other center lane kind of choice, maybe without some Biden baggage, and someone who would be a little more appealing to Republicans or swing voters. But there was sort of another music reference that money can't buy you love. That despite this unprecedented amount of money that was spent, and I think, we could. I'm not sure,
No.
but I mean, this has got to be. He outspent Sanders, I think 75 to 1.
No, and you're right. I mean, this idea that so many people were talking about is Mike Bloomberg is buying the election. Well, if you can't even buy more than a handful of delegates for $500 million, maybe we're not. Maybe those folks didn't give the electorate enough credit.
Yeah, and that was sort of my point. Is there is so much this argument about billionaires buying elections, but it's harder than people would think, and the same thing could be said for 2016. I mean, Hillary Clinton outspent Trump. I don't have the exact numbers on hand, but it was roughly 2 to 1 ish, and Trump still won.
With that, of course, there's the weird confounding factor of free media. But your larger point, absolutely, I agree with. I always, whenever I talk about campaigns to my students, I say you got to think about money as the oxygen of campaigns, because you need it. I mean, if you don't have it, you're done for. But just because you have more of it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come out on top. And Mike Bloomberg's a great example of that.
So, I mean, I guess the other piece that struck me is it's not exactly even how much money you have, but how you spend it. I for one, again, I'm a Republican voter, so I'm not probably the target audience, but I was very much underwhelmed by most of Bloomberg's campaign ads that I saw here in Ohio, and that to the extent that it was also, he always had, it was very much of a Mike Bloomberg, and, sort of, here I am with Barack Obama, and here's Barack Obama talking about me, and, oh, have you seen my friend Barack Obama? Which I'd have to imagine just had Biden like beating his head against the wall. But all of that seemed to not resonate with Democrat voters.
Yeah.
And so that again struck me as fine. Now the other weird exception with Bloomberg was that, like, he wasn't really on the ballot in any of the prior contests, and wasn't even in the debates, and just sort of showed up late to the party with $500 million.
Yeah.
So again, that's a little bit of a different wrinkle.
Yeah.
But I do think that we have to take away, at least to some extent, the lesson that money can't just buy elections.
Yeah.
Although it also occurred to me, like this morning, that if as much money as Bloomberg has, he could probably actually literally buy American Samoa, and, just sort of like, name himself emperor or something of it. But he's like the 12th richest man in the world. So,
yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Bernie Sanders. Now, obviously, his plan of running as the Democratic nominee against the Democratic Party is, run into some problems. And there's this issue of clearly he needs to do something different, right? And that's that issue of the ceiling. And this should sound familiar because, of course, we talked a lot about Donald Trump's ceiling, running as an unconventional Republican, but
right. And we were wrong.
Yeah, but the difference here, I think, is that Donald Trump wasn't running sort of clearly against the Republican Party, not in the same way that Bernie is, right? And so I think it's very difficult and this is why the extent to which Bernie Sanders is behind, I think, is different. It's much harder for him than it would be for a more conventional candidate because he's in a position where it's just so much more difficult for him to change his message and broaden his appeal because his whole appeal to his core is the fact that he doesn't change his message and broaden his appeal. He is who he is. And so that's really difficult. And when you look at one of the big parts of the Bernie Sanders revolution was this idea that the kids would turn out in massive numbers.
Right. And they never do.
No, that they never. I took a look at this. I looked at the data from 1964 to 2018. Youth turnout, we're talking 18 to 24, 32% on average, and that's compared to 63% for people 65 and older. And as you go up in age, all those groups, it gets higher. And also, when you look at that 18 to 24 population, that's around 9% of the U.S. population. The 55, 65 plus, that's like around a third of the population. So building a campaign on the kids who care about your message, that's just not going to work so much. So to me, even that, it's not so much that young people are for Bernie, but politically active liberal young people. And that's just not enough of a group to build a winning campaign on, even in the Democratic Party to this point.
Right. And I would say that cohort has sort of an outsized voice on social media.
Yeah.
Which I think can lead to some of this distortion of really where we are.
Yeah.
If you even unconsciously sort of absorb that, here's all what I see. Another something that this is like a footnote, I guess, to this is, part of an election and stepping aside is losing gracefully, which kind of brings me to Elizabeth Warren, who made sort of the odd remarks about her candidacy failed because of an anti-woman bias, and that again that struck me just as really, first of all, discordant if she's saying that to the Democratic primary voters, and again just kind of nonsensical when who was their nominee last time, and as much as the Democratic establishment sort of moved heaven and earth to make sure that Hillary Clinton was their nominee last time. So what are your thoughts just on the Elizabeth Warren exit?
Well, I think it's easier to exit gracefully if you're, say, Pete Buttigieg or an Amy Klobuchar, and you have probably multiple additional shots at it. This probably was Elizabeth Warren's one and only shot at the presidency. And I think it's true that if not a significant amount of overt sexism, there certainly were some people and are some people who had questions about that word electability because of her gender. And so I can totally see where if this is something.
Had questions?
A lot of people.
I mean, she said Bernie Sanders did. He says he did,
and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the point is that there were people who were thinking things like that, not necessarily because they just said, "Well, a girl can't do the job," but because they were thinking, "Well, a woman just is not going to win enough votes, regardless of how I feel about her. It's those other people who wouldn't vote for her." And
that's those mean Republicans who wouldn't vote for
not
a
even
woman.
necessarily that, but and so I think given all that goes in, the blood, sweat, and tears, and the amount of yourself that goes into a campaign, and feeling like you are the smartest person in the room, and I think there's a very good chance that Elizabeth Warren was in most rooms she's in, and that that this is your
and she'd
last.
Tell you that.
Well, and that this is your last chance, and just seeing it crash and burn, that's just got to be just a deeply devastating sort of thing. And so I think it's difficult to just say, well, oh well, that's pretty tough. So I'm cutting Elizabeth Warren more than a little bit of slack on that.
All right.
Okay.
I could.
Go ahead.
I there's such like this the big hanging curveball right out of the plate that I should go after that.
Go. Take a shot.
But I would get myself in trouble.
Yeah, you always do, though.
If I said it, if I said that, is what you're saying that we should forgive Elizabeth Warren's ungraceful exit because she was emotional.
Oh, yeah, you are going to get in trouble for that. So
no, but hey, you're the one who brought it up that we cut her some slack because
I would cut anyone some slack, and I think it's just
all right. I think so, your point is you're not saying cut Elizabeth Warren some slack because she was emotional. It's that anyone, man or woman, would be emotional in that situation.
And Jay, I think
just yet.
And I think you can attest, having been somebody who's run a campaign and so forth, and at any level, the amount of yourself that goes into it, and it's just it's a tough thing. And when we're talking about a all-in campaign for the presidency of the United States, when you're in your 7th decade, that's a lot, and that has nothing to do with gender.
Well, and people don't understand the amount of a commitment that when I ran my little run for state representative. Again, it was a commitment, and then this was pretty much just in my own city, right? The idea of you're raising millions of dollars flying around the country, all these different states, huge organizations, it becomes such a part of you that having it all of a sudden gone, is sort of a shock. So
absolutely. Hey, before we move on from this, we want to thank our sponsors for today. The first is Empower. And of course, just about everyone could use some extra savings because, you never know when you might need a financial cushion to help you get through hard times or unexpected work closures like, coronavirus. We're seeing that now, But Empower is here to help you save more money than you might have ever thought you could. Here's how it works. You just put in your weekly savings target, and then Empower studies your income and your spending, and then automatically moves the right amount of money into your savings account where, of course, you're going to be less likely to spend it. Empower also features budgeting for people who hate budgeting, and it gives you reports that have actionable spending insights, and it personally tailors smart savings recommendations for you. They can even negotiate on your behalf to lower your bills, which is great. Also, they give you real live, actual human being coaching for any financial questions you might have. And they feature high interest FDIC insured checking with no minimums. So if you want to save big this year, download Empower. That's EMPOWER in the App Store or Play Store. I have, and over 650,000 people have as well. And in Politics Guys listeners, you get $5 when you use offer code Politics Guys and reach your savings goal. Visit empower.me/politicsguys for more details. We're also sponsored today by the Democracy Group, which is a network of podcasts that are united around a goal we can get behind, helping listeners understand what's broken in our democracy and how people are working together to fix it. And in their podcast, you get to hear from scholars, policy experts, journalists, organizers, and just everyday regular people who are exercising their rights and responsibilities as democratic citizens. And all of the podcasts on the Democracy Group, they go behind the partisan horse race type stuff that we're all probably sick of to examine really larger scale issues of politics, government, and civil society. And the Democracy Group also has a number of podcasts who have been right here. I've talked to them on the Politics Guys, like Future Hindsight, Democracy Works, and The Science of Politics. Other podcasts in the network include Democracy Matters, How Do We Fix It, In the Arena, Out of Order, and Swamp Stories. For more information about the Democracy Group, including the latest episodes from member shows and deep dive playlists on things like immigration, gerrymandering, money and politics, just visit their website at democracygroup.org, and you'll also find that URL in today's show notes. Okay, Jay, so what do we have next?
Well, you know what? Can I break the rules just a little bit to throw in something because I want to agree with you because I think you made a good point on something and I wanted to follow up on
Oh,
it
please
before
do.
we
Yeah,
move
yeah,
on
yeah.
to
Oh,
the next story.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, there have been a lot of these comparisons of the Sanders movement running against Democratic Party or as an outsider to the Democratic Party and the Trump movement of 2016. And I think you hit on a really key point that I think is worth repeating is that um, Sanders, and I'm just going to say it in a different way, the Sanders coalition, the Sanders cohort, doesn't bring anything new into the Democratic Party, right? Other than maybe energizing some youth votes, which doesn't really work that well. Even if you energized them all, it wouldn't move the needle all that much.
So when you say doesn't bring anything new, you mean from a voter, like bring new people into the
Exactly. From a
coalition? Okay.
voter
Okay.
turnout standpoint,
Gotcha.
reaching out, I don't think there are any people who are Democratic socialists right now who are
I
swing
got you.
voters.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no Democratic socialists out there who's like, yeah, maybe Trump. Um,
No.
as opposed to when Trump ran, I think there were a lot of the, blue collar Democrats, Reagan Democrats, or again, independent sort of folks in the middle.
Even some Obama voters who voted Trump.
Yeah, obviously, from the numbers, Obama voters. Or maybe Obama, maybe people who voted Obama last time, or maybe that's maybe the better way to put it, who voted for Trump. In that essentially what I'm saying is Trump expanded the reach of the party, whereas what Bernie brings doesn't. And I think so many liberals mistake this because they view Trump as this arch conservative, which he really wasn't. Right? I mean, if anything, he lost some hardcore conservatives, never Trumper kind of things. But I just think that's a point worth making as we go forward. And then in a couple months from now, people will think we're really smart.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So our next story we're turning to is the coronavirus and its effect on both politics and the economy. It's sort of a weird thing to talk about because it's the world has just been so blanketed with coronavirus news. But as of this morning, the total infections worldwide are more than 100,000. 80,000 of those are in China. China has suffered 3,000 deaths related to the coronavirus. Again, as with any numbers coming out of China, I think you take these with a grain of salt. U.S. infections at this point number 336. And deaths to date are 16. Regardless, health officials are now saying this is a matter of when, not if, sort of situation. Economically, I don't even want to talk about the Dow Jones, Mike. It's been, you get these glimmers of hope, and then tremendous drops following that. But just to put a sense of where this is in the world economy, Chinese exports have tumbled by 17% in January. Yeah. And on the one hand, you might say, okay, well, that's a good thing because they'll have to import more. But their imports have also fallen by 4%. Just because there's not as many people going to work or getting stuff in. The Fed has responded by lowering an emergency rate cut of 1.5%, which again was something surprising, gave the market sort of a little bit of a jolt. But again, there's still more backsliding over long-term concerns of this. So with the caveat that neither you nor I are doctors or public health people or have any background in infectious diseases. I guess the next question is where do we go from here politically? There's been some back and forth, especially I've seen coming from the left about whether the Trump response has been appropriate thus far. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is the first major crisis not of his own making of Donald Trump's presidency, and it's been pretty thoroughly botched. Not surprising because in a crisis, you need a sort of calm, cool sort of person to reassure people, and you need a good amount of a consistent message, and a calm response.
Which is why he appointed Mike Pence.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump. That's not Donald Trump's. That's not something Donald Trump has ever been known for doing. Donald Trump is a disruptor. Donald Trump gets people worked up. So this is completely outside of Donald Trump's area of competence, such as it is. And so it doesn't surprise me at all. It also doesn't surprise me in the fact that when you take a look at, some of the things that Donald Trump, his administration have done, they disbanded the National Security Council's global pandemic team in 2018. They cut CDC's global pandemic funding by 80% in 2018. So, I think the thing with crisis funding, or with preparing for crisis, is everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people think, well, if we're going to cut, that's where we're going to cut. Because, of course, most of the time, by definition, you don't need emergency funds, emergency preparedness, except when you do. And then this idea that you can just, as the president has suggested, well, we can just hire these people back, right? That's not how it works. And so this, to me, was a clear, when you take a look at, for instance, the testing kit issue, compare the United States to other countries, it's pretty clear by any reasonable evaluation that the United States has handled this very, very poorly. And that falls squarely on the Trump administration. And so, again, doesn't surprise me, because this is not an administration known for its competence. And surely they have been incompetent in their response to this.
Well, I guess I'd push back a little bit on what specifically you think has been botched, because
I mentioned again, a few things
the
right?
Democratic talking points have been sort of, well, Trump tried to cut funding for NIH, CDC, that kind of stuff. But of course, those cuts weren't actually made. They were never realized.
No, he actually did. To be clear, the CDC's global pandemic funding was cut. This was not a proposal that was not done. It was cut by 80% in 2018. That is just simply a fact. It's also a fact that Donald Trump disbanded the NSC's global pandemic team in 2018. That's a fact. And so it also is a fact that the testing in the United States, the availability of test kits, is far, far below what it was in, say, South Korea, in the UK, and a bunch of other countries. These aren't just airy sort of things. These are actual facts on the ground.
Okay. I guess, what I turn to is this the type of situation where if you had the NSC global pandemic team still intact, what would they have done differently?
Well, I mean, you're asking to argue, argue a negative. So, I mean,
well, no, it is, and that's why I'm saying it's sort of.
Well, I think we can say
unfair to say this is.
Well, no, I think it is fair to say, because the idea that, well, can you say that having people actually on the ground ready to respond to this would have made the response better? I think most people would say, well, other things being equal, yeah, we're going to assume that having people who are ready for something like this and have plans in place, and that's their job, that they're here, yeah, that would make things better. And saying that, well, we don't know that. Yeah, sure, we don't know that, but come on. Well, and also, not only that, but the president using words like hoax to talk about this, that is just outright irresponsible and dangerous. And you get Trump supporters interviewed saying, yeah, I don't even know if this is really a thing. The president saying things like, well, some people just get better by going to work instead of sitting around at home. Or you get the president's son saying things like, well, the Democrats probably want millions of Americans to die in order to bring down my dad. And no one on the Republican side just disavowing that remark, but instead saying things like, well, the Democrats need to turn down the volume. Are you kidding me? This is, if a Democratic, you cannot tell me that the Republicans, if this had been during the Obama administration and this had been the response, that people wouldn't be screaming from the rafters, including, by the way, Donald Trump, who as a private citizen was all over the Obama response to previous crises like this, which was handled far better.
So, well, first of all, I'll disavow whatever Trump Jr. said, but
I appreciate that.
So there you go. But to me, I guess if we are now again U.S. infections at this point 338. Obviously, it's bigger than that. But
we don't know because of the lack
because
of
we don't
testing
know
kits.
what we
But
don't
yeah,
know. But the test kits, as I understand, are making their way out there and are widely available. In a lot of places, we might not need test kits at this point.
we don't know. But that's the whole point of having test kits.
Right, we don't. I understand we don't know. But again, there can be predictions based on listen, how many people even are suspected. I know in the state of Ohio, I think there's like 220 some people who are being monitored and have been tested, and we have like something like 3 people that we're waiting results back on, and a number of tested negative. But on the hoax thing, I am going to push back on that because I think he was pretty clear, saying he's not saying that coronavirus is a hoax, but he's saying that the Democrat talking points that there's something else that could have been done, or that this is because of something he did or because of lack of funding.
Well, yeah, I mean,
now it's a poor choice of words. It's a poor choice of words because he throws that out there and people misunderstand, and you have a press that is eager to misunderstand.
Well, wait a second.
But I don't think at any time the president has said that this is somehow a hoax. And of course, look, he's.
Well, let me ask you this. Hold on. I'm going to push back hard against this because the idea that he has done nothing wrong and everything has been perfect or something like that, how do you square that with the fact that in the United Kingdom, which only had at this point, I think a couple days ago, 115 positive cases, has so far tested almost 19,000 people for the virus, whereas in the U.S., as far as the latest data I have, only under 2,000 people. The fact that the testing apparatus has not been available, how is that not a failure of government? I mean, protecting people in a pandemic is a core function, one of the core functions of government. And the idea that this response has been somehow not perfect. I mean, this idea that, everything's done fine, it just stuff happens. Are you saying that, basically the Trump administration has handled everything fine and, just stuff happens? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, yes, I am saying that. I think. I mean that we're monitoring folks who are coming in. We're testing folks who are at high risk. There were some goof ups, and there were government goof ups by the CDC where people requested testing, and the CDC said, "No, thanks. Sorry, you don't meet the criteria for who we're going to test." It wasn't a matter of availability of kits, which again I think
actually it is because we don't have enough kits.
Less of a problem. At the press conference the other day, I mean, the press kept pushing on. Is this a situation where anyone who wants to be tested can be tested? And I think that's sort of almost a ludicrous idea that anyone in the world just says, hey, or anyone in the country says, I need a coronavirus test kit. Test me now. No,
of course not.
The government has a responsibility to look at those most at risk, the places where the disease is most likely spread, people who have the symptoms, also have some likely contact, and move forward that way. And at this point, no, is the response perfect? No, but no response something like this ever is. But my sense is we are handling it well, and I don't see a. Yeah, you think
I would hate to see what handling it poorly would be. I guess if you think this is handling it well, maybe Fox News thinks we're handling it well, but I do not see how one can square that with just the facts on the ground, and but anyway, look, I would point to the numbers. That's what I would point to. Yeah, exactly.
These other places are doing all the testing, and how many confirmed, and we'll probably know in a couple weeks where we stand and how we've done at containment. But I think the United States is going to turn out having done much better containment than a lot of other places.
Well, would you agree at least that the president has been irresponsible in many of his public comments?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. He could do better. But you know what else? But he also made comments that were really of a piece of what the CDC and other folks were saying, that, look, don't panic. And if Trump says don't panic, then people say, oh, it's He's saying he's playing this down. He's not taking this seriously. When that is really sort of the wise advice, I think. I think there's also, I don't know that he said you can get better by going to your job.
No, what he said was, he said literally, and I'm only just barely paraphrasing. He said,
yeah.
and I quote, "Some people get better when they go to work instead of sitting around at home." That's exactly what he said on Fox News.
Right. Well, again, that's Trump sort of misspeaking, but
no, not misspeaking.
There's something
misspeaking. How is it misspeaking? It's just Trump just not giving a damn and just saying whatever comes into his head because that's what Donald Trump is.
Oh, my sense is he's trying to make the point that for a whole lot of people who have been infected, what they end up with is sort of a mild to moderate cold, and they're better before too long. And that's actually been a problem with the spread because a lot of people don't. There was a story in a German company who had Chinese employees who had visited, and they had then folks who, again, they thought it was coming down with a cold. Didn't seem like a big deal. Went into work and then spread it, and that's sort of the issue there. Is that there for a lot of people this is not a serious life-threatening illness.
That's what you get from that. But I mean, a normal person's going to hear that and say, "Yeah, the president says it's no big deal. Go into work, whatever." I mean, it seems to me that a lot of people are just so carefully and meticulously parsing what Donald Trump is saying to make it sound even the smidgen of like, well, this is a responsible thing to say if you look at it from this angle, standing on your head with the wind in the west or something like that. I mean, it's just a manifestly irresponsible man who's making a public health crisis far worse.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I look at it differently because I think most people in America understand who Donald Trump is and what he says, and I don't think there are many people, and this is where you and I would disagree, that would take him literally or would look to him for medical advice.
I think a lot of people take Donald Trump literally.
I don't think there's anybody who's going to show up to work and say, "Well, the president said I should go." I do what the president tells me.
I think a lot of people. I mean, like I said, there have been people who've been interviewed at Trump events saying, "Yeah, I think this coronavirus thing is a hoax." Using the same words at the press. And so, I mean, where do they get that from? Well, I would be willing to bet that when the president of the United States uses the word hoax in close proximity to the word coronavirus, people mash those things up, and that's dangerous. So another point I wanted to make is, this brings up the related issue of how our social safety net and employment benefit system is totally not designed for this. It's easy for people to say, well, if you're sick, just stay home. And maybe that'll be a week, maybe that'll be 2 weeks, whatever. But a lot of people don't get paid sick leave. A lot of people only get a few days of paid sick leave. And a lot of people with kids, when they use their paid sick leave, it's because their kids are sick and they stay home to take care of their kids. And, people like me, I can put my classes online if I had to stay home or something like that. But a lot of people are not in that situation. Plenty of Americans are in a situation where they're living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have the time off. They don't have the benefits. And if things spread to the point where some, infectious disease people think they might, this is going to be an incredible economic hardship on these people. And that's a major problem.
So and what do you recommend?
Well, I mean, I recommend what I've always recommended is we need a far better social safety net. We need a lot more guaranteed sick leave. We need a system that can protect people in situations like this when through no fault of their own, they miss a paycheck or they can't go into work for a week or two. That should not destroy them economically. And we don't have a system like that. And that's a tragedy.
So, well, Look, I would agree with you that I think having sick leave is good for workers. It's good for the company, and good for the country all around. But that said, and again, we don't know as far as how big this is going to be, how many people would have to stay home. But I mean, consider. Every year we have much more sickness from general things like cold and flu that we've had for forever. that infect thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, versus what we're looking at now, where we're still in the hundreds, and even China is at 80,000, which, if you think of that in proportion to their population, is a pretty small drop in the bucket.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just making a larger
what I'm
point
saying
that
is, now, I mean, I'm more concerned that the fear we have, the fear is fear itself, and it's sort of like there is a little bit of opportunism here in saying, well, this is something we've always wanted anyway, and here comes the coronavirus. So now I think we ought to demand government required sick leave.
we should demand that, and not because
but the better way, I think, is let the market do it. We have a situation right now.
Yeah, that's worked out really well. That's worked out really well. We have millions of Americans.
We have a situation right now where employers can't fill enough jobs. And wages are rising, benefits
Slowly.
are rising.
No, benefits are not. That's crap. That's just not true. But we have a situation where joblessness is very low, but wages are rising very slowly, and benefits are not rising at all in any appreciable amount. And so this is the case where for decades now, we've had a situation, especially as the workforce has become less and less unionized, that the power of individual workers to ensure that they're taken care of has been less and less. And we get a situation, not just like coronavirus, but just with seasonal flu, which, certainly tens of thousands of people die, and people can't afford to take the time off and stay home because we have a totally inadequate safety net. The market has had generations to provide this. It hasn't done it, and that is a failure of the market. And when markets fail, that's when government needs to step in to take care of people, and that's what we need to see happen. Okay.
I'm going to take also a little bit of a different view on this, and I think that in the end, the politics of this may end up helping Donald Trump.
Okay, how's that?
And again, you're going to say that's crazy. That's insane.
No, I'll wait. I'll wait to hear you out before I say it's crazy. Go ahead, tell me.
Well, if you look at what has been the Donald Trump mantra from the beginning is that. Look, I want to have stricter border control. I want to know who's coming and who's going in this country. This would be a very Trumpian sort of message, right? This is a situation where that originated in China and was brought here by travelers. And I think you could make the argument if we had better control, better screening, and all this sort of thing at borders. We would have better containment. We're getting that now, and it's sort of he's going to be able to say, "Look, I told you so." This is just one reason why we need to have secure borders. The second is the impact that this has had economically on the world has come largely because so much is made in China. There is so much dependence on China for supply chain stuff, for things that pieces of what we make here are made there. And Trump has pushed the, American first and want more manufacturing here. The tariff, the trade war had actually pushed some of this manufacturing supply chain stuff away from China because people were starting to think, look, there's some concerns here. Now, it didn't ramp up quick enough because it's a big investment and a lot of people are willing to wait it out. But I think there's this message out there that people are realizing that, look, China is great to do business with, both from an export standpoint and an import standpoint. But when you look at the Chinese government and the way they operate and the lack of transparency there, I think a lot of businesses are starting to rethink how much emphasis they want to put on China, which again is a very Trumpian message of we don't want to be dependent on some foreign country for whatever it is that we need, whether it's supplies for medicines, whether it's supplies for gadgets, whether it's making iPhones. And there is sort of a subtle anti-globalism sort of message that's going to appeal to the Trump populist base and make other people say, yeah, well, maybe he's got something there.
I I see what you're saying. I don't think it's crazy. I think it's going to appeal to exactly the sort of
A
people.
moment ago, you thought it was crazy.
No. I said I would hear you out before I said it was crazy. So I actually, but no, I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's exactly the sort of message that appeals to a lot of Trump voters. I don't think it has any broader appeal because the people who would believe that sort of ridiculousness are exactly the sort of people who already voted for Donald Trump. Because, of course, the answer, and I know you're not anti-globalization in that sense. The answer to the answer to this is not to say, well, we're going to just build Fortress America and big, beautiful walls and, issue everyone with masks and keep all those funny looking people out, certainly. But I can absolutely see where this is the sort of thing where a lot of Trump voters, a lot of nativist type people would point to and say, see, that's exactly right. Them damn Chinese people, they got diseases and so forth. We need to keep them out. And that's horrific and horrendous and totally wrongheaded. But yeah, that's Donald Trump. Absolutely. So I don't disagree with you. I
think you misunderstand me.
Okay, go ahead, please. Try to elucidate.
What I'm saying is it's perfectly rational for American companies right now who have a big reliance on China to start rethinking that.
Oh, I don't think American companies are rethinking that at all. I think you're just wrong on that point. I think American companies are eager to invest in China. They see the growing market and they want to get in on that. So the idea that Donald Trump is making American companies less interested in China, I just don't agree with that. I think the tide of history and demographics and following the money is just now pushing more and more companies toward China because that's where the money, that's where the people are, that's where the future is in Asia. So no, I disagree with that entirely.
Again, I think you're misunderstanding me.
Okay.
My point is, say you were an American company and you have a factory in China that makes some kind of component that goes into the widgets that you make, or the pharmaceuticals you make, or whatever.
Or more likely, you contract out for a part.
These companies are now saying, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have this many eggs in the Chinese basket because of things like this can happen that can shut down our supply chain. And really do us harm globally.
Okay, in that sense,
we can find other places to source those parts, widgets, whatever they may be, that have a government where we have a stronger belief in. There's more transparency, and is less likely to result in these kind of massive shutdowns. That's going to have the ripple effect of shutting down our facilities elsewhere in the world. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's this nativist.
Gotcha. Okay.
The funny looking people. What I'm saying is, I think there's a strong economic argument to be made for let's diversify our supply chain and not over rely on the Chinese. Likewise, let's not over rely on sales to China. It's great if we can make sales to China. And I think every company in the world probably wants to do that because it is this huge market. But also realize that if they are betting the farm on sales in China, that could be a riskier proposition because that economy it can be closed off at any time.
I don't think it's as risky as you think, but I see your point, and I to a certain extent I agree with that it emphasizes the importance of having more flexibility in your supply chain for events. But in terms of dealing with things like coronavirus, that you can actually make a case that an authoritarian government is something you want more because they can take stronger actions right away. So I wouldn't say this is a coronavirus thing. I think this is a large coronavirus might have kind of highlighted the importance of having some sort of plan B for your supply chain, though that's difficult too, because just like when we were talking about,
it's a big investment, right?
Exactly. And if you're not going to need it 99% of the time, it's really hard to justify to your shareholders, well, we have this set up to go and we're never going to use it probably, but if we need it badly. So that's the the kind of logic of the market pushes back against that sort of thing. But yeah, now that I understand what you're saying, I think there is an important point, and that's
much less crazy.
Yeah, well, and and that certainly is a downside of globalization, that when something happens in, say, China or something like that, it inevitably affects the entire world in a way it wouldn't have 50 or 100 years ago or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. On that, I agree. All right. Well, on that point of agreement, maybe we can move into our recommendations for the week. This is kind of a new thing we've wanted to do for a while. We used to kind of do a thing like that. This sort of like with what we're reading. This is just kind of a broadening of it to talk about maybe things that we're reading or seeing, or even maybe even negative recommendations like, oh, stay away from this or something like that. But we thought we'd try it. So, Jay, what do you
Vacation in Wuhan, negative recommendation.
Yeah, no, probably not a good idea. So what are you recommending this week, Jay?
Well, okay, mine is going to be completely weird, and,
Okay.
and it's not necessarily.
Excellent.
I guess that I would recommend everybody do this. It's just I want to sort of relay a experience that I had that was sort of surprisingly fun and interesting. Something a work project that I'm working on required me to go back and review the debates on the Ohio Constitution
Wow.
as amended in 1912. So I'm not recommending everyone just go out and read the roughly 2,000 pages worth of debates on the Ohio Constitution.
That's good because no one's doing that. Okay.
Right. People, Ohio, they're writing this down. Ohio Constitution. Yeah. I'm on it. But you could read your own state's constitution. But I was struck by, and here's the thing: you would enjoy it. And people who are sort of government junkie kind of people would enjoy it. People who enjoy, again, sort of a high-minded sort of discussion. And if you read the stuff how these guys talked compared to how our politicians talk today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's what's fun because look, I'm looking. This is the 1912 revision in Ohio, so it's not founding father language, which can be sort of dense and tough to get through.
Weird capitalization.
It's still very much modern, but there's very much just a cleverness and like the insults back and forth are freaking hilarious, and also some of the controversies. There was a like 2 pages worth of discussion of a newspaper article alleging that one of the members of the Constitutional Convention was drinking beer during the evening and had offered beer to another, and it is so much fun. And again, it's not something I guess a recommendation, but if you are of that bent and just I'm sure all these in Ohio it's online for free. You can just pull these up. And I imagine it's the same in most other states. But it was just a refreshing window on sort of a different age and seeing what's different and what's the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's very much stuff of things that are very much still the same. And that gives comfort to my conservative soul. You know what I mean? Small c conservative. Yeah. You know what I mean? That there's nothing new under the sun. But there's also sort of the wistfulness of this is as Obi-Wan Kenobi would have said, sort of a more civilized age, right? Elegant weapons for a more civilized age. But
all right. Well, my recommendation is going to go a little bit further back than that, and that is I'm going to recommend the book. Actually, it's Epictetus's Discourses and Handbook, and this is going way back into I don't know, like 100
3rd century or so.
Actually, even before that, first century. So we're going way back. Not just the handbook, but the discourses in the handbook. The handbook's kind of like Epictetus's fun little sayings. They're not really fun, but the discourses are kind of longer.
Some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are, but. As you know, Jay, I'm kind of like half a Stoic, in the capital S, not the small s way. I'm not a hugely small s Stoic, but Epictetus has been sort of a guide to me in a lot of things. And right now I'm going through some hard times, and he's been a particularly helpful guide. And if you don't know anything about Stoicism, what you know about it is probably wrong. And a lot of modern Stoicism is just sort of trash, basically, I think. But anyway, give this a look. And the translation really does matter. Don't get some awful Victorian translation for free on the internet. They tend to be horrible and off-putting and so forth. I've read a bunch of translations. My favorite by far is the Everyman Library translation, edited by Christopher Gill, translated by Robin Hard. It's only under $9 on Amazon. There's also an Oxford World Classics translation that's pretty inexpensive too on Amazon. Great stuff, super helpful. Some I think perennially good advice about living a good life and being a decent person. you can take it in a religious way. Epictetus was kind of a God sort of guy, but it also can be deeply secular as well. And like I said, it's been very personally helpful to me, and I would recommend it too. I've given away plenty of copies of the Epictetus discourses, and I recommend it very highly to folks.
So if I can weigh in, I have the Epictetus discourses and the handbook on my Kindle, and I literally read it probably before going to bed, 4 out of 7 nights a week.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, I'm not making this up. And,
cool, yeah.
And this is a weird sort of thing because Mike, you and I both kind of came to Epictetus separately and on different.
No
different
idea.
routes.
No, it's just a weird coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and then after you read Epictetus, then you're going to want to read Marcus Aurelius and all this other, all the sort of stoicism that goes back there. And it's a really different way of looking at stuff. And it's not always easy, but once you start reading it does start to, at least I find, work in your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And also if you consider Epictetus's life, he was a slave, eventually freed, and then became a teacher, and became a teacher to a lot of other prominent Romans. The world that they lived in, and the consequences of the things that could go bad, and often did frequently. Mike's no fan of Donald Trump, but
there's something that went bad.
We both agree that, like, look, Nero would have been worse.
Yeah.
There's this a great sort of just taking a different view of the world that if I can paraphrase, the only you can't control circumstances. The only thing you can control is essentially how you react to those circumstances. I think it's I also cannot recommend Epictetus enough. So.
All right. Well, on that joint recommendation, there you go. That's a double recommendation. Of course, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But that sort of does it for today, but not entirely, because, of course, if you would like a second full-length Politics Guys episode every week, you can get that by becoming a Patreon supporter. This week, we're going to be talking about a big abortion case that the Supreme Court heard this week. And also, we're going to be talking about some listener questions that folks have submitted. So I'm really looking forward to that. And also, supporters, you get ad-free versions of all of our episodes, as well as a bunch of other good stuff. To get the details and to become a supporter, just go to patreon.com/politicsguys. Also, if you can't afford to become a supporter, we get that, and you want to get those midweek episodes, we will definitely do that for you. Just email me at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll get you all set up with that. I'm happy to do that. Finally, if being a monthly supporter is too much of a commitment, but you'd still like to help out occasionally, you can do that too through PayPal. You'll find the link on our website, politicsguys.com, and stuff you can do for free. Subscribe to the show, leave ratings and reviews, and especially, this is a huge thing, sharing your favorite episodes on social media or email. That helps us out a lot. If you want to get in touch with us, you know how to do that. Mail to politicsguys.com. There is our wonderful bipartisan politics subreddit. You'll find the URL in the show notes. We've also got a Facebook page, and we are on Twitter @PoliticsGuys. The executive producers of Politics Guys, Bruce Johnson, Wilma Moreno, Andra Masker, Daniel Toe, and Chris Wilkerson. Today's show is produced by Jay Carson and Michael Baranowski. We'll be back with a new show next week. We hope you'll join us.